Tsapo.
Hi, Tandeka.
Hey, Tsapo. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
I just wanted to test my sound.
Okay, now sounds audible. Sounds good.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess we'll just wait for the speakers, right? It's pretty straightforward. Do you think we'll take an hour and a half?
No, I doubt.
Okay, cool.
I think we'll probably just have an hour.
Okay, cool.
All I'm doing is just going through the submission template and explaining it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and then we'll hold for questions at the end.
All right then. Maybe I must send a reminder to the people who RSVP'd. Afternoon, colleagues. I see people are still joining. We have about 12 participants, and I've just sent another reminder now. Could we wait just 3 more minutes? I know it's already 1 o'clock, but we have a few people who have RSVP'd, so if we could just take some time and wait for them, and then we'll start briefly. Good day, everyone. Colleen, I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me now? I heard you saying you couldn't pick up a sound. Colleen Daniels. Okay, I'll take it. Everybody can hear me.
Yes, I can, sorry.
Okay, no problem. Thanks, Colleen. Thank you for joining.
Sure,
Okay. Thank you for joining us, colleagues. My name is Tanda Garanti. I'm from Bridge. So we're hosting the meeting today, but as you know, the Real Reform Campaign is going to be facilitating this meeting, and it's around the BELA campaign. There's very few of us in the room. I see there's about 18 of us, which can make for a very intimate and very quick meeting. So we're going to start the meeting now. As I understand, Tsepo will be taking us through the submission template on the BELA, which is the Basic Education Laws Amendment. I think the whole issue here is this bill is trying to make grade R compulsory, but also it's trying to criminalize parents whose children are not attending grade R. So I'm going to hand over to Tsepo. Tsepo's from Equality Collective, and he is also working on the Real Reform Campaign. And Tsepo, maybe if you could start off and just give us a very brief explanation of who real reform is, and yeah, and maybe just also explain to our participants today how Bridge is involved, because people are probably wondering why Bridge is facilitating this meeting. So thank you everybody for being here, and I'm just going to hand over to Tsepo. Thank you, Tsepo.
Thank you so much, Thandeka. Hello, colleagues. Thank you so much for availing yourselves to be here today. We're very privileged and honored to be hosting such a space, and really do appreciate your enthusiasm in participating in this. As Thandeka said, my name is Tsepo Manje. I am the Right to ECD coordinator at the Equality Collective, and also assisting with coordination in the Real Reform for ECD campaign. Briefly, what the Real Reform for ECD campaign is, it's a coalition of multiple organizations and stakeholders within the ECD sector who have come together to mobilize behind this campaign to ensure that we establish a holistic and quality ECD sector in South Africa through legal reform. So a lot of our work in ECD is through changing laws within South Africa so that they provide for early childhood development, which is part of the reason that brings us here today, because the BELA Bill has such a big impact on ECD. And we will be unpacking what that means, what that looks like, and how we can make submissions to make our voice heard in relation to things that are recommended in that bill. And Bridge is helping us facilitate this because Bridge is one of the organizations that sits on the steering committee for Real Reform for ECD. We're made up of 10 organizations and an ECD practitioners on that steering committee, but the Real Reform for ECD campaign is supported by well over 200 organizations and ECD centers. Yeah, the movement is quite broad-based and has quite a big footprint in the ECD sector in terms of getting inputs from various parts of the sector. With that said, I will get into the presentation. I will be sharing my screen. I'll start off with a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation, which will briefly just give the background. I will start off with the legal background. It will be a bit of a law lecture, but I won't go into too much detail. I'll try to simplify it as much as possible. But it's just for us to get an understanding of what a bill is and how laws are made in South Africa. And then a little bit of background on the BELA Bill itself, the journey it has come on, and how we have ended here today. So just please give me a few seconds as I share my screen. Okay. Hi once again. So today's presentation or webinar will be on how to make comments on the BELA Bill. So we're at the stage now, as I will unpack a little bit later, where Parliament is asking for people in the sector to comment on the bill before it becomes an act and before it becomes enforceable. So today I'll be going through how these comments can be made, and more specifically, which issues have been identified by Real Reform for ECD and, Real Reform for ECD, yeah, we'll go through all of those. So the BELA Bill proposes to amend the South African Schools Act and the Employment of Educators Act to align them with the developments in the education sector and ensure access to the right to basic education.
Okay.
For offenses and penalties,
Sorry,
amongst other things. Yes.
Tsepo, you got cut off for a little bit there. We actually lost you for a while, for about 30 seconds.
Sorry, should I start the introduction again?
Maybe you should start the presentation again because you cut off when you were explaining where it's coming from.
Okay, will do. Thank you for that, Tandeka. You'll just let me know if that happens again. As I was saying, we will be talking today about how to make comments on the BELA Bill. And we're at the stage right now where the Parliament is trying to approve this law and pass it in to become an act, an enforceable law in the country. However, before it gets there, we need a part of the process requires for stakeholders and people in the sector to be able to comment on this bill. So Real Reform for ECD has identified some of the issues that we recommend for our supporters to make submissions on, but you are not limited to only make submissions on the things that we will be speaking about here today. A little bit of an introduction is that the BELA Bill proposes to amend the South African Schools Act and the Employment of Educators Act to align them with the developments in the education sector and ensure access to the right to basic education as envisioned by South Africa. So put differently, we currently have the South African Schools Act and the Employment of Educators Act, which are the laws that we look to when we look to the right to basic education. And what the BELA Bill is trying to do is look to these existing acts to see what is missing and how can education be improved. And that is why the BELA Bill has been introduced to amend the Schools Act and the Employment of Educators Act. It introduces new regulations around schools in South Africa, most notably in relation to compulsory schooling for grade R, and as well as strengthening enforcing mechanisms for offenses and penalties, amongst other things. The BELA Bill does deal with an array of different issues. However, in this submission, we will only be dealing with issues that relate to early childhood development or that relate to the sector. So some background on lawmaking. Who makes laws in South Africa? Parliament is the national legislature. They are the government body that makes laws or passes laws. One of its major functions is to pass new laws, amend existing ones, and repeal or abolish old ones. What is a bill? This document that we're discussing today. So a bill is a draft version of a law. It is the document that we engage with before that document becomes enforceable. Most bills are drawn up by a government department under the direction of the minister or deputy minister. For example, the Department of Basic Education, in this case, leading the BELA Bill. This kind of bill must be approved by cabinet before being submitted to Parliament. So this has been done there. It has been submitted to Parliament and now is available to us for comment. The preparation of a bill involves a number of steps. For example, the investigation and evaluation of the legislative proposals. So these are any changes that are being proposed within that bill, and the consultation of interested parties and the public. These are very important processes that need to be followed with every bill. And if that bill does not follow these processes, then that bill will not be passed at the end because it failed to follow the legal processes that need to be followed. So only once all these processes have been observed can the bill become an act and enforceable. Background on the BELA Bill itself. In October 2017, a draft BELA Bill was published for public comment. The Department of Basic Education subsequently received more than 5,000 written submissions from stakeholders and the general public. Upon the completion of the consultation process, Cabinet approved the BELA Bill to be introduced in Parliament in November 2021. In February 2022, the Portfolio Committee on Basic Education mapped the way forward regarding the process it will likely follow to ensure thorough public engagement. Then on 16 May 2022, the Portfolio Committee invited stakeholders and interested individuals to submit written comments on the BELA Bill. The deadline for this is on the 15th of June, 2022 at 4 o'clock, which is tomorrow. And this is where we find ourselves now. We are now commenting, putting in these comments to the BELA Bill. So from here, I will then go on to the template itself, and then we will go through that together. Please do not hesitate to raise a hand, or if you have any comments, please do just indicate that you do have a comment, and then we can bring you in. Alternatively, we can wait until the end of the presentation, where we will hold space for engagement and comments or any questions. So what we're looking at here, what we're looking at right now is a Word document which you can all have access to. This is the template that will help you make your submission and make your voice heard in Parliament. Please note that this is merely a template. Your final submission can be edited to reflect your own views on the BELA Bill. Our goal is to help the ECD sector participate in Parliament's public participation process on issues relating to the ECD sector, and to help ECD practitioners and stakeholders lend their voice to the call for real reform for ECD. So in no way are we saying that this is, you are limited to this document on your comments or your submissions, because I imagine we all have our different opinions. So please do share that and personalize your submission as you see fit. Number two, how to use this document. As I mentioned, you can download this document in Word format, and then you can edit it yourself. So this document can be accessed. You can email me or Thandeka, and we can get this document to you if you do not already have it. However, in the invitation for this webinar today, the link to download this document was made available. Thirdly, what to do in order to submit to Parliament. So once you are happy with the submission, you have to email your submission to the listed email address here, belabill02@parliament.gov.za, or by completing a Google form. The Google form is a little bit more complex, but what you can do is copy some of parts of the submission into that Google form in the appropriate boxes, and then make your submissions that way. Alternatively, you can also make submissions via WhatsApp if it's a more shorter submission that you want to make. Or you can also, so these are your three options of making the submission. Please do note that submissions deadline is tomorrow on the 15th of June, 2022 by 4 p.m. Luckily, much of this submission will be very helpful in terms of giving you content to put in that submission. So I'm not too worried about the time limit, because there'll be enough content for us to use in making our submissions going forward. And please do CC Real Reform for ECD in those submissions. We would like to keep track of all the submissions that have been made, just for recording purposes. So please do email tepo@equalitycollective.org.za. CC me, this is my email address, into the submission that you'll be making directly to Parliament. Before we dive into the contents of the document, I just want to acknowledge and give my thanks to Tess Peacock, Narina Ali, and Kyan Scholz for developing this template. And also thank you to the Real Reform for ECD Steering Committee and the ECD Discussion WhatsApp group for the contributions that they made to the template. It was very much a collaborative document that we have come up with here. So what we're looking at right now is the cover letter for the submission. So this will be what will be accompanying the submission, introducing you as the person submitting to the recipient of the submissions. This is a draft cover letter. Yes.
Sorry to disturb you. We're just not seeing it. We're still seeing the presentation.
What are you? Are you seeing the submission, the template?
No, we still see the presentation.
Oh. There we go.
And I've also posted the link on the chat to the submission template.
Thank you very much, Thandeka.
Okay.
Are you seeing it now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So what we're looking at right now is the cover letter. So this is the draft cover letter for the submission. Everything that is put in brackets is what can be edited by anyone who will be making the submission. So here, when we see the brackets here, you will then include your own name or your organization's name, all through this cover letter. And here we have just a short paragraph introducing real reform for ECD. So this just gives a bit of background on who Real Reform for ECD is, and offers our link to the website just for more information on what the campaign stands for. And we also would like for you to include your personal reasons for why you support Real Reform for ECD, or essentially why you support ensuring a holistic, well-funded, inclusive, and quality ECD services for all children, which is what the Real Reform for ECD is calling for. So this is, again, just to personalize your own submission in terms of giving your own voice to it. And what I do want to stress again, you are not limited to what is in this document. This is merely a template which anyone can use as a guideline in making any submission. So we're now getting into the body of the submissions that are being made by Real Reform for ECD. So the introduction, Real Reform for ECD submission it's a relatively short one, as it only deals with matters relating to early childhood development, not the education sector as a whole. So there are a few issues that we do highlight here, specifically compulsory grade R being introduced, the criminalization of parents who are not sending children to grade R, or when children are out school going age, the children are not going to school, and a few issues that I'll get into a bit later. So our main focus, as I said, is on the introduction of grade R, compulsory introduction of grade R, which is different from what it was before. Before, it was compulsory to attend school only from grade 1, which was the year the child will be turning 7. Now, in the year the child turns 6, that is when it has now become compulsory for the child to be attending grade R. Generally, the sector is supportive of this change of making grade R compulsory. However, there has to be a strong emphasis on the inclusion of play-based learning with this introduction of grade R. And there are some proposed provisions in relation to the compulsory age of grade R that are unclear. I'm on to 1.2 now, about the ages that are unclear of made in the document itself, in the BELA Bill. This is merely the introduction. I'll break these down more as we go along. We also suggest that there should be a transitional period once the bill is passed, because we do not want to face a situation where the bill is passed somewhere in the middle of the year, and then all the children who are not in grade 1, in grade R at that time, have their parents criminalized because the bill is passed in the middle of the year. So nothing is said about a transitional period of which is what we are calling for once the bill has been approved. Real Reform for ECD also submits that it is absolutely essential that compulsory grade R is accompanied by measurable improvements in quality provisioning, including appropriate resourcing, learning support, and qualified teachers who can implement play-based learning programs, with a strong emphasis on learning through play. The right to play ought to be built in to the curriculum that is being made compulsory for grade R. And then 1.4, furthermore, while the Real Reform for ECD supports compulsory grade R provisioning, we are not in support of the criminalization of parents for non-compliance. Currently, the Act criminalizes parents who do not send their children to school if they are of compulsory school going age, which currently stands at 7 for grade 1. So the current Act states that parents can get a fine or face up to 6 months imprisonment, which is already onerous. And the BELA Bill aims to extend this 6 months to 12 months imprisonment. Real Reform for ECD submits that the underlying causes of why parents may not be sending their children to school are often very complex and related to socioeconomic circumstances that require a more holistic approach that engages social service professionals to investigate the matter. So just putting the consequence as imprisonment fails to address some socioeconomic issues that could be behind why parents are not sending their children to schools. And then we are now, I see a typo at the other 1.4. In 2019, President Cyril Ramaphosa, in his State of the Nation address, spoke about introducing 2 years of compulsory preschool education. That is grade R and grade RR. Now what we see in the BELA Bill is that they are only addressing grade R with no mention of grade RR. Although we do recognize that the department is not ready for compulsory grade RR, we do call for the department to work towards making this provision available in the future and making this commitment in the legislation. And then 1.5, we emphasize that we are not we're not commenting on all aspects of the bill. As I said, we are only focusing on parts that relate to early childhood development. However, just because we're not talking about the other parts does not necessarily mean we're in agreement or in agreement with all the other aspects of the bill. We will only be talking about what is in relation to early childhood development. So the first amendment that we are submitting is in relation to section 3, which is compulsory grade R. So as I said, we generally support the amendment of section 3 of the South African Schools Act that will require compulsory grade R attendance. This is also in line with the international trend and the UN saying that the right to early childhood development should be a basic right for all children. However, we find a technical issue with the wording that is used in the provision. Put very basically, there is a sentence added at the end that does not make sense. It contradicts other sections of the bill, specifically in relation to the admission of the age of admission for grade R. It states that provided that a learner who will be turning 6 after 30th of June must attend grade R the following year. What this means is that if a child turns 6 after the 30th of June, then they will only be, they must attend grade R the following year and not in the current year. The bill as it stands says that for every child in the year they are turning 6, it's compulsory for them to go to grade R. But then it says that the child who's turning 6 after the 30th of June must attend the following year. What that means is that the child will be in grade 1 when they are turning 8 years old. This is a departure from the requirement that that children must be 7 or turning 7 in grade 1. Because of this delay, that means by the time they go to grade 1, they will be turning 8 in that year. And there has never been a cutoff before in the other in the other legislation speaking to this point. So this just creates confusion as to the requirements of the recommended school-going age. So Real Reform for ECD recommends 2 options to address this confusion and to provide for more clarity. The first option is that should parents or caregivers feel that their child who is turning 6 after 30th of June is not ready for grade R, which is what is assumably, what we can assume is the reason for this change, that some parents might think that the child is not ready. So if they do feel that the child is not ready, the legislation should say that they may send their child into grade R the following year, only making grade R compulsory for children turning 6 before the 30th of June. This would require replacing the must with a may in the provision. Option 2 is, the second option is to take out the provision completely. This will result in the provision being similar to the status quo, that is that all children turning 6 in that year should be registered to go to grade 1. So taking out this added part that only the ones born before 30th of June go to grade R, but if the child is turning 6 in that year, then they have to be in grade R, as it is for children turning 7 going to grade 1. This will eliminate the confusion in terms of when children should be going to school, in terms of it being compulsory for them to go to school. An important distinction here that we need to make is compulsory age and admission age. Here we're talking about what the legislation is making compulsory. Beyond that, it is what the legislation also speaks to recommended or the admission age, and extends that to children who are 4 turning 5 in that year. So that is more of the permissible age that children can go. But here the legislation is speaking to the compulsory age, which will then be criminalized if the child is not at the school. The next amendment that we comment on is Section 5, which is supporting quality learning at ECD centers, at grade R rather. So good quality grade R is important for child development and valuable preparation for grade R. Currently, an estimated 70% of children enrolled in grade, currently an estimated 70% of children enrolled in grade R. However, in 2013, evaluation found that grade R had virtually no effect on the outcomes of the child in the poorest quintiles. The evaluation found that children in grade R received 1/3 of the resources that children in ordinary public school learners in the basic education system. Our support for compulsory grade R is therefore on the condition that grade R is appropriately resourced, emphasizes play-based learning, and that there is adequate training and wages for practitioners in the grade R sector. An important component of quality early childhood development is play-based learning. As the UN states that there tends to be an overemphasizing of formal schooling in relation to early childhood development, which we need to stay away from. So this is moving away from the schoolification, if you will, of preschool and still emphasizing play-based learning. So here the submission speaks to when the grade R becomes compulsory, it still emphasizes that play is important for learning, and we're not just looking at school outcomes like reading and writing and such. I'm not going word for word on this document. I'm just giving overall messages in each submission, as everyone will have the time to engage with the document and change it as they see appropriate. However, we do call for the emphasis on play-based learning to be included in the norms and standards as a sign of commitment to keep play as central to early childhood development at grade R. The next amendment that is suggested is in relation to section 3.6, which is the failure to comply with compulsory school age will result in an offense. So the South African Schools Act currently makes it an offense for parents without just cause and after written notice who fail to cause any learner from attending a school once they come of compulsory school going age. So as it stands, it is a criminal offense for children not to be in school as it is right now in grade 1, and parents can be sentenced to 6 months in prison. However, the bill now introduces a more harsher sentence saying that parents can face up to 12 months in prison if the child is not in school in those school-going years, which now starts at 6 years old. Rural Reform submits that this should be rejected. This is part of the international trends to move away from using jail, prisons, and fines as the only mechanism to deal with people who are unable to comply, and actually recognize that people have very much different reasons as to why they are unable to comply with laws, most of which stem from socio-economic circumstances. So this is more of a criminal justice reform angle, where we try and encourage the Department of Basic Education to take a more holistic and sustainable approach and engage with social service professionals in addressing some of the issues that might be arising. And when we speak about social service professionals, we do not just limit it to social workers, but social services across the board to help find the reason why parents are not sending their children to school, and also to make recommendations. And these recommendations will be addressing the issue much better than imprisonment would. And these recommendations could be anything from counseling, referrals to other organizations, community interventions, community education, and behavioral therapy. This, as I said, is a much better approach to dealing with the situation than sending a parent to prison, because sending a parent to prison is not in the best interest of the child in the long run. Another submission that we were suggesting is in relation to grade RR. As President Cyril Ramaphosa did announce that with the introduction of grade R, there would also be the introduction of grade RR, saying that there needs to be 2 years of education before grade 1. And we do agree with, as I said, with the compulsory grade R. However, we do also acknowledge that the department is not ready to introduce compulsory grade RR due to the lack of resources in the sector, in the department. However, the provision for grade RR must be of high quality in order to contribute meaningfully to children's development. A 2015 study assessing the introduction of pre-grade R in South Africa concluded that the required structures must first be put in place in order for pre-grade R to fulfill the role as an equalizing stepping stone to social equality. So right now, there is no mention of grade RR in the BELA Bill. However, we are calling for the department to start making provisions and showing commitment to providing for grade RR in going forward. Another amendment which we are suggesting is the admission of grade R, which has now been extended to 4-year-olds turning 5 in the year that they will be in grade R. There are quite a lot of opinions on this. The sector is not quite uniform on whether it is appropriate for 4-year-olds to be sitting in the same class as 6-year-olds. Many people in the sector are of the view that children who are 4 years old turning 5 in grade R is inappropriate and incoherent. People are of the view that 4-year-olds are too young to be in grade R, and it would mean that 4-year-olds are in the same class as 6-year-olds. The developmental needs of these two age groups are different, so putting them together would not be beneficial for either group. With that said, there is a suggestion that the admission age be revised and reconsidered. However, it is very important that when you do make your submission, you are able to elaborate on your views. And here we have left a space open for people, for practitioners and stakeholders in the sector to share their own reflections and experiences in terms of mixing ages. So 4-year-olds mixing with 6-year-olds. What are some of the experiences that you have had, and what sort of insight can you give on the outcomes of that? So please do feel free to share your experiences here and engage on whether it is appropriate or not for 4-year-olds to be in grade R. And then lastly, we recommend this transitional period. Once the bill is passed, whatever time it is of the year, if it's passed in June, August, or October, that means that from that moment on, that bill will be enforceable. And parents who had not sent their children into grade R at that stage will then be automatically criminalized, because the law will say that their child who is 6 at that time should be in grade R. So here we're calling for a transitional period of at least 1 year, so that the Department of Basic Education is able to go into communities and educate people on the bill, and parents can be prepared for the repercussions that the bill might bring. And additionally, children who would be turning 6 in the year that the bill is passed should be allowed to go into grade 1 the following year without having to go to grade R if they weren't registered in grade R the year that the bill was passed. So in conclusion, we have these 5 submissions that we recommend to be made from this submission. The first one being that the portfolio committee must make sure that grade R emphasizes play-based learning and that teachers are properly trained and supported. Additional norms and standards are required to ensure that grade R is properly resourced. Specifically, age-appropriate play material and equipment be provided. Parents must not be criminalized for non-compliance with the compulsory schooling provision for their children. Rather, a holistic approach guided by social service professionals is more suitable and sustainable. The Department of Basic Education must prepare time-bound plans for the provisioning and support of grade RR in community-based settings. And lastly, transitional provisions must be introduced to allow the phasing in of the requirement of compulsory grade R attendance. That brings us to the conclusion of the submission. Thandeka has posted the link to the submission for further engagement in the comments. So please do access that and engage with the submission. And if you need any support in making the submission, please do email me at, I'll share my email address on screen now. Please do email me at tepomanja@Equality Collective. If you have any questions or if you need any assistance with your submissions, I'm available for the rest of this afternoon and tomorrow morning before the submissions are due at 4 p.m. Thank you very much. We can open for questions if there are any.
I see there's a question from Natalie. Natalie, you can go ahead.
Thank you so much, Thandeka, and thank you to the whole team for this amazing presentation and all the info. It's so greatly appreciated. I actually just wanted to highlight something that I was a little bit concerned about and maybe just would like input on. And it's really on this last section of amendment number 6, amendment to section 504 with regards to the admission age. Because it's sort of a bittersweet one for me. I totally agree that they cannot expect, in some respects, a 4-year-old to be working on a 6-year-old level. But I worry that if we highlight that they should not allow this, it's almost going to be directly contradicting what alternative education such as Waldorf and Montessori actually advocate, because within our environments, we advocate mixed age grouping of 3 to 6-year-olds, 6 to 9 and 9 to 12 and so on. So it almost seems like there's going to be a bit of a challenge here, because I worry that if BELA then changes to stipulate no mixed ages, you can't have a 4-year-old working with a 6-year-old, that's really going to implement, that's really going to have an impact on schools who advocate mixed ages. And not because we're forcing a 4-year-old to do a 6-year-old work, but because we encourage the social development within a mixed age group. So I don't know how we can look at this to make sure that we are, highlighting that you cannot expect a 4-year-old to be on a 6-year-old level, and at the same time say, but we do still respect mixed age groups and highlighting the needs of the child. Am I making sense here?
Yes, Natalie, you are. And what you're raising is definitely, it's a good point. Like the Montessori program, which, like you say, advocates for mixed groups. The worry, I think, is more in relation to the quality that will be provided by the Department of Basic Education. You're right, it is a fine line between not allowing it at all and making it a free-for-all. And trying to strike that balance is sort of the task for us here. But I think that what is a stronger emphasis for a more broader application is to emphasizing the improving quality of early childhood development at the younger ages, and not necessarily emphasizing the mixed groups as a broad application, but maybe left for specific programs that are better equipped to deal with multiple age groups.
Definitely. I think if there could almost be like a little subclause in that, only because I know how much for the last, actually, since I've been involved in this sector, so we're talking 21 years, how we are still battling with the department who comes for site visits and goes, wait, you have 3 to 6-year-olds in one classroom? No, you're not allowed to do that. And then we have to try and educate them as to why and why it's actually successful. So I worry that if BELA states something, we are going to be right back to square one with the department. So it's almost, if there's a possibility of putting in some sort of subclause saying, with the exception of programs that understand how mixed age groups work. Yeah, I don't know how we can work around it, but thanks very much.
I'm interested to know if there are any people in the room who have an opinion on this specific part, mixed age groups, and how perhaps we can address it. I would like to maybe just open the floor.
Well, I'm wondering, Natalie, in your and I see Louise has her hand up. But my question is, Natalie, your model, right? If in your mixed age groups, do you have 4-year-olds who are in grade R? Do you find that you usually would have 4-year-olds who are in grade R? Like how does that work? Like in terms of grading them, you know, because normally there's a grade RR and a grade 000 and whatnot, but I'm not sure how it works in Montessori.
So our mixed age groups work within the developmental phases of the child. So we have 0 to 3, 3 to 6, 6 to 9, 9 to 12, and so forth. So unless you have a gifted, talented, special needs child who is at the age of 4 already doing 6-year-old work, it's not commonly found that you have a 4-year-old who's now ready to move on to 6 to 9. So we do not, our authentic schools don't grade our children. We work with the child's developmental needs. So you may have a 4-year-old who is at a 4-year-old's level for English or Afrikaans or language or Xhosa, whatever language they're learning. But in mathematics, they're actually on a 5 or 6-year-old level. And that's why we don't grade our children. We help our children build up their strengths and work on their weaknesses, and just in overall, I'm trying to give you something in a nutshell here, but overall work on the needs of the child. But it is very, very seldom that we have a 4-year-old who's ready to attend primary school. And normally when that does happen, and it has happened 2 or 3 times in my own school in the last 15 years, is that we will not push that child onto primary school. We'll rather continue to stimulate them within the ECD program until they are socially ready. Because sometimes they may be academically ready. You have some children who are incredibly bright, but socially they are on their age level. And that's where, again, the beauty of Montessori is that we can keep stimulating that child academically until they are socially ready to move on to socially and emotionally ready. I don't know if that really answers your question, Thandeka. So ideally, we do not break them up into grades because every child shouldn't be pushed through a standardized mold.
Okay, thanks, Natalie. Louis?
Thandeka, your microphone is off.
Oh, okay. No, I was saying, sorry, Louise, just before you go, maybe I should just say that maybe, Natalie, this is something that the Montessori Association needs to clarify in your submission. I think because it's quite specific for you guys, perhaps you would need to clarify it and provide the evidence, you know, and understanding for why you do it that way in your submission.
Yes, thank you. We will. We've also put it forward with Naisa. Thank you.
Okay. Louis, your hand is up.
Thank you, Tepu. Can you hear me?
I can. Thank you. Please go ahead.
I just want to share with you an experience that we had when I was working for the Department of Social Development.
Okay.
And that was now 2012. We got from the community lots of requests when we were working on the ECD policy that and the Children's Act that we have to consider to make it compulsory for people who are receiving the child support grant, that they must at least use 50 Rand of their money that they are getting and ensure that the 0 to 4 children go to a early childhood development center or program of whatever. We investigated that, and eventually what happened was that people from the legal section said that we cannot do this and get it compulsory because of the fact that the government at that stage was not in the position to ensure that they would be able to absorb every child then in a ECD program. Now, that experience made me think of this presentation and document that you had presented here. And what I was thinking now, what can maybe added or be considered is that I appreciate this document tremendously because it gives detail as well. But what we have to make sure is that the Department of Basic Education eventually is ready to receive these children that they are saying are supposed to be compulsory entering grade R. And we all know that this year again, we have seen it in the media that the grade 1 children and older children, there was not enough places for them. I mean, I think Western Cape was still struggling in May to place children, and even here in Gauteng. So, so that concept of the readiness, the Department of Basic Education must be ready to receive these children with resources, with the people that will be the teachers, and because if they are not ready for them, and they think they are first going to look at the numbers that come in and then try to put all the things in place, it's going to be disastrous. And then you are going to find this situation where they put children, younger children, in the older children's classes, and eventually it just become a mess, you know. So that readiness concept, we must try to put that in as well.
Thank you for sharing that.
I think IECYC, if they have gone through this document, they will support it definitely. But then that if you do not see your way open to add that, then we can put it additionally in.
Yes. No, thank you for sharing that. The readiness is one of the biggest parts of it, because even when we're talking about the grade RR, we acknowledge that they're not ready to make it compulsory legislatively yet. However, they can develop plans and timelines for resourcing and phasing in grade RR, but also creating an enabling space for early childhood development centers from birth until before grade RR. So there has to still be an emphasis on investing and investing in the ECD sector as a whole, and creating an enabling space for ECDs to be able to take in children and make them ready for grade R and grade RR. So in your submission, you can add on and emphasize that point of supporting the ECD sector as a whole beyond what is compulsory at grade R. Thank you for sharing those reflections, though. Yes, and like you say, it is. Oh, like I said it rather, it is merely a template that we can all just work on and elaborate where we want to elaborate, or even take some stuff out which we feel like we don't agree with in this specific submission. So feel free to play around with it and make the edits that you feel you speak to the needs that are at your center or in your community. Do we have any other inputs, engagements? Well, we can take that as everyone being captured. Thandeka, do you mind wrapping us up?
Yeah, no, thank you, colleagues. So as Tsepo mentioned, if you would like assistance, please do email him. I've put his email address on the chat, and it was also on the presentation. I've put it on the chat once again. But I understand that Tsepo is available to assist until tomorrow because the submissions have to be finalized by tomorrow. So I guess the most important thing within the sector for me is usually just the sharing. If you're able to share with people who might even feel very strongly about these issues, but might not even be able to access us. We know a lot of the times, ECD practitioners are working on the ground. If you have that opportunity and you are able to maybe facilitate a space where they can also have their own submissions and assist, please do, or anybody else for that matter, so that we can have as many submissions sent to the department. Yeah, so I think we can end it off right. We can end it off there. And please also remember to CC Tsepo at Equality Collective when you do send your submission. It's good to keep record of all of the submissions that have been made, so we can continue to hold our officials accountable when we have these kind of processes happening. So thank you very much, colleagues, and hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye, and thank you again for all the amazing information.
Bye-bye, Natalie.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hi, Isabel. Hello, Isabel. Isabel, is your hand up?